It's April, which means it's almost Easter, which means it's time for hot cross buns. But we're not gonna make just any old hot cross buns, we're gonna make something easier. We're gonna make a no-knead hot cross bun. So the recipe comes from the latest issue of Olive magazine, from the latest cover feature for them. There is also a link to the recipe down in the description box below. Now the ingredients for the dough are fairly classic, but it's the method that's a little bit different. Because we're making a dough that's enriched with butter and eggs, it can be quite sticky. And if you've never made this sort of dough, the first thing you're likely to do is add more flour to prevent it from being sticky. But this is not what we want. By developing the gluten, normally through kneading, we end up with a dough with the correct texture, which is nice and light and fluffy, rather than dense and chewy, which is more likely to happen if you just keep adding flour. Now, of course, you can use a mixer to knead this if you have one, but this is a no-knead recipe for those of you who don't have a mixer or are just getting started and don't make bread that often. So, what we're gonna do is basically mix everything together. So we have some salt and some mixed spice, and then some light brown sugar, and some yeast. Now, this is a fairly simple dough. Flavors aren't that complex. If you want to change the spicing a little bit, go for it. But mixed spice is kind of your classic flavor profile for a hot cross bun. With the light brown sugar, I like just to rub it through my hands a little bit just because it has a tendency to go a little bit lumpy. So just make sure any big pieces are broken up. And then it's simply a matter of adding our wet goods. So we've added our eggs to our milk and melted butter and just whisk that together. And then all we're gonna do is make a well in the middle, pour in our wet goods, and then either using your hands, you can just bring it together. I'm gonna use a dough whisk, but basically all you wanna do is mix this together. If you're gonna use your hand, what you wanna do is kind of form it into a claw and then just bring it together, kind of squeezing the dough through your fingers just to make sure that there's no pockets of flour. So I'm just gonna bring it all together in the middle, and then that's basically it. And now we just leave it. We're done. No, really, we're done. Okay, not quite done, but all the hard work is over, I promise. So we're just gonna cover it with some cling film or a kitchen towel and just set that aside for 2 hours. So all we're gonna do is leave the dough for 2 hours at room temperature whilst we chill out and the dough chills out too. So during this rest period, we're gonna do one other thing, and this is basically in place of our kneading. Now, bread dough will develop gluten to help create strength naturally over time, and that's where the dough will get some of its strength, but we're just gonna help it along a little bit more with what's known as a stretch and fold. And we're gonna do this twice, once after hour 1, once after hour 2. So we're gonna take a wet hand, we're gonna dip that into the bowl underneath the dough at north, east, south, and west. So basically 4 times. We're gonna dip our hand under and then just gently pull it up and stretch and fold it over, and then do the same thing again, again, and again. So that stretching and folding just really helps to create strength in the dough. So once we've done that for our second time, after 2 hours have elapsed, we're gonna take our finished dough, we're gonna pop it in the fridge. The cold environment of the fridge means the dough will ferment and improve really nice and slowly. The added benefit will be that the dough will become nice and cold and firm, which will also make it easier to handle. Now that our dough is ready, we just need to add the fruit and form it into buns. So we're going to take our chilled dough, going to tip it out onto the work surface. You'll see that it's really nice and firm, and that's because all the butter in the dough has gone firm as it's sat in the fridge. So what we're going to do is just press it into a flat-ish layer, and then we're going to add our fruit. So when it comes to the fruit, I'm obviously using raisins, which is one of the more traditional choices, along with currants and sultanas, but really you can use whatever you want. I've used cranberries before, I've used cherries before, dried obviously, but you can also add things like white chocolate. It's really up to you. This is just a more traditional hot cross bun. So just tip it out on top of the dough, and then basically what we're gonna do is just press it in just a little bit, and then with our hands just fold it in, and at this point we're just going to work it for a couple of minutes, just until everything is nice and evenly distributed. So it's basically just a few folds really. The dough will warm up slightly, so if it becomes really sticky, you can just throw it back in the fridge just for a few minutes. So once the fruit feels really nice and evenly distributed, we're going to divide it. Now you can either do this by eye, or you can do it with a scale. If you're going to weigh the buns, the easiest thing to do is place the entire dough on a scale and take a measurement. My dough says it's just over 1.2 kilograms of dough, so I know that each bun, for 12 of them, is going to be about 100 grams each. So just cut it in half to give you a rough starting point, and then we're going to go bit by bit. You do not have to be as accurate as I am. I just like everything to be nice and even and accurate. So when it comes to forming our balls of dough into actual hot cross buns, there are a few ways of doing it. One of them is the way I prefer, which is just flattening it slightly and then just roughly shaping it into a ball, making sure there's a little flour on top so it doesn't stick to your hand, and then you're going to place it onto the surface, and it needs to be a part of the surface that doesn't have a lot of flour, making sure there's no flour on the bottom. And what you're going to do is cup your hand over and you're going to roll it, and basically you're putting just a very gentle amount of pressure on top so that the bottom drags, and as you roll it around it tightens up and forms a really nice tight ball. That is slightly trickier. If you want an easier way, again, what you're going to do, just use a little bit of flour to press it into a flat disc, turn it upside down, and you're basically just going to pull all the sides in like that. Now this won't be quite as tight, so you might not get as perfect rounds, but if you're just beginning, this is a really nice way to do it as well. So once all the buns are formed, we're just going to place them onto a parchment lined baking tray, and you want to set them close-ish, but just a little bit of space. We want them to join as they prove, so just set them a couple of centimeters apart. And then we're going to cover them with cling film and set them aside for about 1 to 2 hours to prove. So now that the hot cross buns are nicely risen, we need to take these buns and turn them into hot cross buns by, well, adding the cross. Thankfully, it's very easy. All we're going to do is make a paste with flour and milk. For the milk, we want something with some fat still, so no non-fat milk or skimmed milk. And for the flour, we don't want anything with too much chew, so no bread flour, because the cross will end up being really tough. So we're going to use all-purpose plain flour. So just mix flour and milk together until it's got a nice thick consistency but still pipeable, and then we're going to brush the hot cross buns with egg wash, just a beaten egg, and then pipe that cross on top. So now we're going to pop the hot cross buns into the oven for about 25 minutes until they're really nice and golden brown. Depending on the oven, you might want to turn them halfway through so they brown nice and evenly. So once the hot cross buns are out of the oven, you've got a couple of choices. The recipe in the magazine, we just leave them as they are. The egg wash gives them a really nice sheen anyway, but if you want to take it a step further, give them that classic sticky, shiny hot cross bun finish. What we're going to do is just add some glaze in the form of an apricot jam glaze. So all we're going to do is take a couple of tablespoons of apricot jam, thin it with a little water, and then bring that to a boil. And that means we're going to get a really nice spreadable but sticky mixture. Spread that all over the hot cross buns with a pastry brush, and then just leave those to cool completely. So that is how you make my no-knead hot cross buns. Now, how you serve them is up to you. I really like them still warm from the oven with lots of butter, or toasted with lots of butter. Basically, they just need lots of butter. So the finished hot cross buns have this beautiful texture, really nice and light, nice and springy, just delicious. The recipe is from the current issue, the April 29 issue of Olive magazine. It's also linked in the description box down below. Now, if you make this recipe or any of my recipes, I love seeing your versions of them. So don't forget, if you're gonna post a picture of them on Instagram, give me a tag or use the hashtag #TheBoyWhoBakes so I get to see it. Until next week, I'll be either eating hot cross buns or maybe a couple or 2 Easter eggs. Either way, I'll see you next week.